In today's episode, we discuss concluding campaigns, building toward payoff, and, happily, tearing up your notes. This is the DM Shower Thoughts. Welcome back. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to today's episode of the DM Shower Thoughts, the show where we talk about our shower thoughts in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop scenarios, and how to become your best self through gaming. My name is Adibus.
I'm John.
And I'm Ian.
All right, we have an agenda, and a lot of what we're talking about are the endings or the approaching the conclusions of campaigns. So, take it away, Ian.
Yeah, so my Blood in the Valley campaign just concluded on 2 Fridays ago, and it was the first campaign that I have ever concluded, and I gotta say, I think it went pretty well. According to my players, it went very well. There were definitely some things that I felt like I messed up a little bit on, but that was more like presentation-wise. I think the actual content of the campaign concluded excellently. So just a quick rundown of what happened was throughout this campaign, I've actually been kind of leading up to this war that will happen as the Valley of Desireen, which is in another place, but it's not the same, is invaded by the Zarovich Dominion, because I am basing this off of the Curse of Strahd campaign. So throughout this campaign, I've been building up to that, and the finale, of course, is going to be the final battle where they're trying to fight off these invaders. I had a lot of fun trying to figure out how I was going to structure this battle, because it's a war, right? So I wanted it to feel big, but I didn't want to make it so that it's just waves upon waves of enemies coming at the party. So what I did is I took the party and I isolated them in a combat scenario with the leaders of the enemy side, which involved a watered down, I'll say, Strahd von Zarovich, who's not a vampire in this situation, and some of his like lieutenants basically and royal guards. And so I took a long look at this party and the party composition, and I thought, how many spellcasters we have in this party, and what it would take to challenge them in this kind of scenario where they've usually exceeded very well. And so I created some custom royal guards, which basically they were all polearm masters, and they could like trip you with their polearms, and of course, you know, they have reach as well, so they don't have to be right next to you. And that's what I sent on the casters. But the front line, ironically, was one of the casters, which was Vincent, John's character, who's a cleric. Right, okay. The other part of the front lines was Oops, who's a barbarian. And so I had to contend with that as well, because they're always dealing lots of damage. Oh, what happened?
Nothing.
I've never heard their name before.
Oh.
Yeah, Oops is like your very stereotypical Goliath bear totem barbarian who he just oops.
Yeah.
It's actually it's amazing. He's like the only character I've seen take the charger feat, and like it was like perfect. Like used it every single chance he got to like super awesome effect.
Yeah. No, it was amazing, and we really got to explore his character, because he didn't have like a backstory per se. Like he had some general ideas, but there was no like details. And so over the course of this campaign, it was just on occasion exploring like, what were Oops's parents like? Why is his name Oops? You know, and parents became like a huge like theme for his character. He's always looking for like parents, and whenever parents are involved in something, he gets really invested. But like we still don't know what happened to his parents. Like he just shows up. Like it was really weird. But anyways, so this battle is like really grand in scale, and I have the other combatants that are like the friends that they've made along the way fighting alongside them, but outside of the actual battle map that they're on. And I had contingencies for if, for example, if somebody went down, I didn't want it just to be that they went down. I wanted something that, like someone maybe that they had interacted with to come and try and help or something like that. For example, Oops, again, he made friends with werewolves. And if he went down, I was actually going to have the werewolf girl that he met, Carla, come in and do some ferocious werewolf things. But he's a barbarian, so it wasn't likely.
Yes, it wasn't much of a...
Yeah, but just in case, things like that. And I think the biggest thing that I struggled with in this particular scenario was just trying to keep it interactive, but also keep it going like smoothly. For example, I had musical cues that I wanted to use, and I was halfway through the thing that was supposed to cue the music, and I totally forgot to use it. So I just hastily, I was like, hold on a second, let me turn this on. Dun, dun, dun! Like, something like that. So anyways, yeah, that was my perspective. I was really happy with it. John, how did you feel?
Yeah, so I've been a player in this mini campaign since quarantine started. So you got to say this is like, we called it a mini campaign, but it was like a 5-6 month storyline, which is for a lot of people that is their campaign. That's a long story arc. Originally we had started as just like a really last minute spontaneous pickup game. Thank you so much. That like we just were really expecting more of a module. Like, and what we played through was Death House, which was just, here's a house, go explore it, it's haunted. The character that I had created was, like you said, his name was Vincent. I wanted to play test the Twilight Cleric rules because you let us start at level 5, and I'm like, it'd be super cool to be a cleric with Liamon's tiny hut. That was like where it started, right? And eventually it evolved into, I was thinking through the Twilight Cleric story, and it made me think back to a previous character I had played in one of Adam's games, who was Anton, which he wanted to be a bard. He wanted to be a circus performer, but he unfortunately got stabbed in an alleyway that he went down the wrong way. And it ended up triggering a vampire who was desiccated in the sewers to drink his blood and go into him. So basically, it started with Anton unwittingly having this vampire warlock powers. But eventually, I built this character into Vincent, where Vincent was like the host body for this vampire that basically had made a deal with him like, hey, Mother Night is in trouble. You need to be my arms and legs for this like mission, And one of the things with and so it started as kind of like a simple. It was really cool. Like Vincent's right side was more violent than his left, so whenever he cast a healing spell or a light spell, it was with his left side. But his all of his dark powers, like Toll the Dead, were with his right. And it ended up being a really cool kind of character. And one of the things Ian had made the decision of was that this mini campaign would act as a prequel to the Curse of Strahd module, which is why Strahd wasn't a vampire yet. And in fact, it was cool because Strahd's Dominion was coming in to take control of the valley, which is what this final battle was set up to be. But because my character was a vampire or hosting a vampire, this is where Strahd gets the idea to become a vampire, where he sees their power in a battlefield firsthand. And it was very cool because there was already this world event that was going to happen that we knew about, but it tied our specific player characters in so that it felt like our decisions mattered, not only from a character building perspective, but from a choice perspective, like you said. Like, the brilliant thing about how Blood in the Valley ended was we got to see the decisions we make have consequences later down the road, where it's like, we need to get the valley together. All the friends we've made with along the way, we have to call on them now for help. Friends that we ignored, like there was a village, I think it was Kresk, right, where we hadn't gone there because we're like, they don't need us right now. And then it's like, well, you need allies. So you didn't invest in that community yet. Now it's going to be harder to get them on your side. And eventually we did, but there was more roadblocks. It was harder to get them to see the urgency of the situation because they're just, to them, we're just outsiders passing through. You know, the British are coming. Like they don't really have that same investment. So I think the key thing that I didn't notice any presentation things. The battle felt grand just based on how you set it up. You made it clear, like, you know, all of the soldiers can tell that you're all 10th level characters. They don't want to go near you. They leave you up to the leaders and stuff. Yeah. And the key thing was payoff. There was so much payoff based on the little things that we built up week after week and relationship after relationship. And the more I think about it, the more payoff comes from the relationships that you build with the NPCs, but it has to be player centric. You know, it can't be, it's not about how amazing this NPC is. It's about how, even if that NPC is amazing, this PC changed their life, and this is now the payoff you get to see later down the road. Does that make sense? And that's to speak to the mechanics of the final battle. I thought it was brilliant because not only was it an anti-party in that it was evident that you had made decisions to counter certain party members, it didn't make them useless. So an example is that one of our party members was doing the Sorlock build with Eldritch Blasts, you know, and the Mage Slayer, he was like a monk. I have no idea what his actual class stuff was, but
yeah.
His whole thing was that he had the Mage Slayer feat, which made it so that basically our party full of spellcasters, he was getting free shots off of every round, and we had disadvantage on our concentration checks. So we had to like really think twice. He also had a coat of force resistance. So our Warlock, who is just so used to like, Eldritch Blast is my thing, you know, all of a sudden wasn't working as well. But now she had to pay attention to the other pieces in play that didn't have resistance to force damage. So it wasn't something that shut her down completely, but it was an extra challenge that made us rethink how we should approach our resource allocation. Resource being, you as a player take on this piece on the map differently. I'll handle this thing, you know. So it was like a very, very interesting encounter because of that, you know.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it because, I wasn't sure because I really didn't want to like shut down any one particular character like you're saying there, because I know I've seen that happen to me, not entirely, but like,
yeah,
I've played the Sorlock build. I've gone against enemies that are resistant to force damage, and so it's like I thought, like besides not being able to cast and quicken Eldritch Blast, like I will always love to do and do 8d10 damage if I hit them all.
Yeah.
It made me think about what other possibilities there were for my spells. And for Alakai, in this case, who is the Sorlock, she's also a Yanti. And she had, I gave her Acid Ball, which is basically reskin Fireball. And that it has a lingering effect as well. Because I thought, you know, like we were talking about a couple episodes ago about Acid Stream and how that lingers.
Right.
It only makes sense, you know, why not? Why shouldn't all the acid spells linger?
Yeah.
And so I gave her that, and I didn't give any of the enemies acid resistance or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I actually made them vulnerable. This is one thing that I thought was a slight mistake, a slight miscalculation. I made them some of them vulnerable to necrotic damage, and I had forgotten that many of the characters in this party use necrotic damage. So that was my mistake.
Yeah, to me that's not a mistake though. That made the battle that much more interesting. Yeah, because it meant that there was something clear that we had in our toolbox that we could pivot to, you know? So, and that's one of the things that I do in almost every single monster I have now has some kind of resistance and some kind of vulnerability. Because, you know, the other thing is, so the Mage Slayer, it was funny because my character was Alucard, like from Hellsing. The Mage Slayer was Anderson, like from Hellsing. And it was just a very, like, didn't even try to cover it up or reflavor it.
Nah.
It's just we got these two characters from this awesome anime we both like in D&D rules. But because he's a priest, he had resistance to radiant damage. So he was resistant to radiant, he was resistant to force. It would make sense that if he has a resistance to radiant, that may lend to a vulnerability in another area. So even though, yes, a lot of us had access to necrotic spells, it wasn't like a mistake. To me, it kept it balanced, where it was like, now that it's harder to defeat him in this one area, it's a lot easier in another. Another example of this, and we'll get to this in a little bit, was in a Grey Owls game that all of us played last night, we were fighting an airship. The airship might have a high armor class, but it does not have a high dexterity save,
Yeah.
So if it's big, clunky, and tough, it might not be as fast. So there might be a specific category of abilities that we can draw on in order to be more successful, I think vulnerabilities tie your creatures to the world more. And I think that there should be more of them just in combat. And I would even go so far as to give them to player characters if it seems appropriate, like and of course this is because the RPGs I grew up on were like Pokemon, where like the vulnerabilities and resistances of each creature were so structured into the world that it was an of course, and it would make sense that, like, what does it say about a creature if it's, vulnerable to necrotic damage, versus vulnerable to radiant damage, So, and I think that if a player is thinking through from a story perspective, what would make sense to use against this creature, and they're rewarded with vulnerability, that now makes the rules of the world make more sense, So if it's like, I have a fire creature and it's vulnerable to cold damage, that makes sense, If you've got like I don't know, like a werewolf and it's vulnerable to fire damage, there might be like you're following lore and stuff, and that would kind of make sense for it, So and the other thing is, having damage types have an effect other than damage, So it's like, one of the things I like is, like a troll is a good example. If it takes acid damage, it can't regenerate next turn, where it's like, it might not be vulnerable, like take double damage from something, but it might take away its armor class or take away a feature or take away an ability where, or, if it takes radiant damage, it has disadvantage on dex saves because it's panicking, or something like that. I've always really liked encounters like that, because now it allows the party to just be clear in the structure of its approach, So that way, if there's a story thing that makes sense to the story-based fighting has a mechanical resolution that makes sense to encourage story-based fighting. Otherwise, it's just use our best ability, what does the most damage,
Yeah, and I think that that makes a lot of sense, because what's cool about D&D is it's not just the Pokemon logic, right? Like, it's not just resistant to cold but weak to fire. You can have creatures that are resistant to both, but still be intrinsically linked to one particular element. Just take like some form of a fire elemental, or no, better yet, Ice Maiden, which is a monster that I actually used against you guys. She is technically, according to whoever made the stat block, resistant to both fire and cold, because she's just that cold. So like, it's interesting in D&D because you're playing with the notion that when you lean towards one extreme, it doesn't necessarily mean that the opposite of that extreme is going to have a negative effect on you. But there could be something else that just take fire again. You don't just put water on a fire to put it out. You can just, cover it with dirt or something like that. Use telekinesis, lift a rock, smash it, or something like that. So it's interesting because it gives the DM a lot of leeway in how they can structure the fight, and it frees up any resistances that they might experience otherwise in creating an interesting monster. So yeah. I'm glad to hear that you like the campaign, and I'm really looking forward to my future campaigns and stuff. I am going to be revamping how I do Curse of Strahd based on the events of Blood in the Valley, but there's still going to be some things I just get excited thinking about them. So
yeah, dude. And as a player, I tend to be really critical. Like I just in every sense of the word, critical as in like critical thinking, critical as in constructive criticism, critical as in like I want to get a critical hit, like it's kind of like every I try to look at it like holistically. So like, if you see a system that's out of balance, what's happening that's where it's out of balance. And the Blood in the Valley ending was just so satisfying on so many different levels. And I do think it comes back to Payoff. I think that this began as kind of a DM-driven story that became a player-driven story after we finished the Death House. And the events, I could see you prepping them in the world, but it was always in the context of what the players wanted. And I think that's the thing that made it satisfying was we knew that choices we made mattered. And that's like the key thing. And you got to see the other end of it, if we were like unreasonably a jerk to someone, we got to see it, if we were really kind to someone, we got to see it. There wasn't like a point where it was just like, well, why even bother? Like it was very cool. That's what I got.
That's always my goal.
Yeah.
Compelling storytelling and cooperative gameplay.
Yeah, the cooperative.
So you've concluded this campaign, at least for now, and I concluded Night Owls recently, season 3. That'll be a discussion for a different time because it was a interesting monster, and I think, John, if you had seen his original stat block, you would have gone, no, because he's completely unfair. But that is a different discussion. But with that conclusion also comes, during my deep prep back in the cave, thinking about, how to close and what to close, and looking at Grey Owls specifically. So Grey Owls is, for those of you uninitiated, the dark fantasy world of the Night Owls universe of my custom world. After magic is broken, things kind of suck, and we are heroes in a way, trying to fight for the light in some way, shape, or form in this dark, gritty world. And a group of 10 people changed to a group of 4 and 6, and then we added on 2 more into that group of 4 that joined at level 15. So they missed out on all of the levels 1 through 14 development. So some modes of Payoff have been kind of missed by them because of just there's not enough time that they've been there. But I hope we're doing okay with that. However, Team Tree had their how to really go into this. So this was an amazing session. The last session for Team Tree was amazing. And I'm going to want to go into exactly why. So a little bit of history and build up. Team Tree is dubbed that way because their main focus is to return to the city that we spent a lot of time in the campaign. And several of the characters are interwoven into the history of the World Tree. The World Tree is Aoife, the World Tree, literally. And the cataclysm that sent us into this age where magic broke, all the druids died, so to speak. Sorcerers were changed forever. A lot of things got really messed up. The tree burned away, like it was destroyed, and it obliterated a portion of the world and several other planes where the tree was. And this, in effect, has changed fundamentally several of the classes in the world. I had a player that selected a sorcerer or a custom archetype called a Scorch Sorcerer, which is essentially power through pain. You take backlash to augment your spells and make them more powerful. And in so doing that, it is a fragment of the world tree. The sorcerer actually has a seed inside of them that is a piece of the tree, and it's another personality. It's a remnant of an old entity that was destroyed. The energy changed. And what this does, it's created a narrative of not vengeance, but redemption in rebuilding the tree. So Team Tree. The main focus of several of the characters is trying to find the way to rebuild that tree. Now, there are 7 houses that are like towers that govern the city. One of them blew up because a player made a choice that changed the fundamental god that was running that tower, and the tower exploded. The police then took over that set of ruins and are now trying to figure out, hey, what the heck happened? In the meantime, because of choices and connections and heroism of the players, they made friends with an engineer from a tower called Kontu, which is the engineering space. It's where all the science and artifice happens. The players have never been here before, but now because they made that decision to help someone, they have an in. Long story short, they discover that the top of the Tower of Kontu is a greenhouse where they are growing synthetic versions of the seeds of the world tree. And our Scorch Sorcerer, who has been collecting seeds now throughout the campaign of other sorcerers and other people willing to join her, is referred to as the alpha by all of these synthetic experimented on seeds, and is propelled downward into the basement of Kontu. All of our friends jump in after her, and that's where we left off before the break. In returning, they are in the basement of this science space and surrounded by hundreds of vines that have been constructed by this science area. But these are all semi-sentient beings with memories, and their branches reach through some portions of the city and the entire tower. And in Io especially, plants have a certain sight to them. So they can witness things and remember them because they're trees. They have long memory. So they're in this science space, and this was an opportunity for me to fill in gaps in the understanding, because these trees have seen things that the players haven't. And all they really want is to be heard, because they're locked away basically in a dungeon, a science vessel. They also respond to the character that has been collecting the seeds. So there's this automatic affinity that starts to flow through. The players are now witness to several memories that the plants have seen. At first, they sort of panic because someone touches a vine and it plays a memory, almost like it's playing a film. But they hear voices of this creature called not Strahd, but Striad, who is a faith militant that they've already killed. He was a vampire. They killed him. But he's back, and they all panicked for a minute. But they learned that these are things out of order in a timeline. And they start to piece together some of the plot holes that were there before, that were always the key to it all was Kontu. And all the while we're doing this, I have planned all of the lab areas, the den where the main scientist is. I've got plans for Dr. Coriana Beckett, who is now the project manager of Kontu. There's all these opportunities for them to sneak around or to be up front and assault people and be like, where is this guy? And all that stuff is planned. I've got map, tons of notes ready to go, all these secrets that they can start to uncover, because they're in the place now where they can piece those things together, and they're so close to piecing those things together. Our sorcerer is now sensing the power of the other seeds, all the synthetic ones and the ones who have been stolen and brought here. All the while, she's been collecting them. She currently has 57 other entities inside of her as a way to sort of rebuild the tree. The player starts touching the vines, and the vines welcome her. They kind of lift her up, and it feels very warm and welcoming, like we're supposed to be here. While we're finishing up with some of the memories, and characters are getting more agitated because certain things are being revealing, like, oh my God, they stole my father, and that's why he never came home, and that's why my mother died. Oh my God, they stole this person because they needed an anchor. What terrible people. I'm going to burn this thing to the ground. And they start to get agitated, and then our wizard, Clover, gets a little message that says, if you've ever trusted me, trust me now. Believe in me now. Thank you for your help. Teleport everyone out of here. I'm going to make a tree. And that sorcerer cast Wish and created the world tree. Now, everything was stacked in this person's favor. Magic does not operate the same way as it does in standard Raw because it's broken. So Wish has a godly lens to it that automatically kind of opens up everything. However, the odds were stacked in this person's favor. They were surrounded in that perfect storm of things. I rolled, but it was a very, very low chance that it wouldn't succeed. And I just love the cinematic nature of everyone's getting riled up, and all Clover has to do is just touch everyone and teleport. And leave behind the sorcerer, who then casts Wish, and a tree begins to grow. And it grows rapidly, using the hundreds of seeds that are in this science space that have been experimented on and messed with. They all join together. And the effect of that, all those maps, all those tunnels, all those little spaces that might have been explored, they get filled with plants. This tower erupts in a tree growing out of it. Never before have I been so pleased to have hours of planning decimated by my players. It was wonderful. One, because it pushes the cataclysmic nature of this toward our end game. There are a lot of factions and the dark, shadowy organizations that know about the World Tree and know about its agencies and are watching for the big sign. Oh my God, there it is. And also we have a creature called the Arbiter that is a persistent thing in Cloudsinger, in many campaigns that I've run, some sort of perpetual watcher, probably the first lore master of the world, who has told, especially Team Tree, when a cataclysm hits, all of your secrets, all of your machinations won't matter. You're going to find out who you really are when cataclysm comes. And it's like, there it is. So this is when we have factions of people who go, oh God, and start to run. You have people who go, oh, there's the sign. And you have people saying, well, we're not quite ready, but we need to move now. And you also have the Grinning Brand, who are the police of the city, who instead are rallying around the tree, going, no, don't attack it. Don't do that, because we don't know what this is. And also, it's probably a good thing. Let's not mess with it. Let's keep the people safe, evacuate, and keep people away from this. And you start to recognize who are the good guys, really, when things go down, and who was playing. Also, it's worth mentioning that we had another schism when that wizard teleported everyone away. They landed, and one of the other characters wasn't there. Not the one making the tree. They resisted the teleport and went, no, I need to go get the scientist's journal, which has information about my father and a whole bunch of other things. So they risked their life to go get that and didn't make it out in time. They took a whole bunch of damage, and with the help of a demigod, they were able to get out. It was tense there for a bit, though. And it also ushered in this wonderful moment of closure for this long and arduous journey for that sorcerer, and allowed a way to say goodbye, at least to that character as they are. I think even Matt like wrote in his character display, he changed his name to Tree because he's like, well, I'm the tree now. That tree that does have sentience and now has eyes throughout the city. But it was such a beautiful moment to share, and then to also recognize we're not quite done, because now that the tree is up, the things that threatened it in the first place, they're coming now. And it was a cool moment of being able to take the lore of the world and bring it completely full circle. We had this realization at our break, which was the legend that surrounds the world trees, that it calls all of its knights and all of its denizens, all of its protectors before the Elderburn, before the thing that destroyed magic. And nothing came for it, nothing attacked, but then it exploded and the Elderburn happened. We brought up that, in a way, this is its full circle. What if the battle it was preparing for was this one? And all the friends and all the allies and all the people that this sorcerer has made throughout the course of the month of play, those are her knights. Those are the people that are going to stand with her and protect the tree. And the tree is still growing, so it's like pushing through this city that we've been living in for 3 years, and it's slowly destroying it. But the right thing is the tree needs to be protected now. And so we have, what was so cool is we sort of pushed the end game. By that action, all that planning is gone, and we're in the end game now, boys. Let's do this. And it ushered in this possibility of having immense closure, even with conflict, because now this is when the push comes to shove. But that was enacted not by me. That was a choice of a player. And I'm just so pleased with how that came into being, that I'm just so excited for the next one. Now, there might be an epilogue after that, but the main climactic conflicts are going to resolve one way or another because the tree's up. And that's the main trigger for all the big bads that have been sort of working in the shadows and have started to take a step back. They're waiting. They're the long game chess playing creatures that can move a piece here, see what happens, move a piece there, watch and laugh, and okay, I'm doing that. Once the tree comes out, it's now we got to make our move. And I'm just so excited to have that movement and then have the players be able to say, no, we rally behind the tree. Like, we rally around our friend. You're not taking it. And it's just such a great moment of, for all their little squabbles and all their little moments of difficult trust issues, when push comes to shove, they still stand together. And that's really cool. It's just, it also takes some pressure off of me in a way, because now I'm planning for one big conflict that's going to have a 3 to 4 act structure. And this is where I can start to interweave everything and bring it to that conclusion, instead of thinking, well, now they're here, they know these things, let's have another session where they figure out this thing, and then they have another session where this happens maybe, and then the big thing. Nope, big fight's here, let's go. That's really cool. And then we had Team Bug's penultimate session, at least to that climactic conflict. And that was really fun to approach in a 3-act structure. I was telling Ian a little bit, but I'm going to just reiterate the whole thing. It was so helpful to draft the story beats for Team Bug last night in a 3-act structure. One, because it kept me on point with when breaks would be. And 2, because it let me see a full framework of these are the things that should happen so that we can come to a narrative pause. Even if it's cliffhanger pause, it's a narrative pause. And so it was, the initial act was kind of getting ourselves settled again. So it was the initial conversation with Iakovas, who's a Titan, He's in Legacy lore, he's a megalodon that can change into a human, and he's connected to Umberlee, the god of like tempest and water. And they had quite a torrid affair in Legacy lore, but I thought it'd be fun to have him in the world. But he is cursed by her. So there's an initial conversation with him to see if you can get him inside the ship, or he can get himself inside the ship, because when the sun goes down, he turns into a megalodon. And then we had a player missing last time, so I wanted to have a sequence of a reason why he would be asleep while the ship goes down, which is he has a vision quest, essentially, and try to invoke some significant meaning for that. And I was really happy with how that played out, really happy with how he interpreted things was really special. And that was Act 1. And we took a break. Act 2 was the closing of whatever the deal was going to be with the Titan, so that you could power the ship. And then the ship gets in the air. That's the end of Act 2. You head back to your base of operations to find that it's under attack. And there's a reason it's under attack, but we'll find that out later. But you have a choice point. And it's, do you trust the soldiers on the ground? Because now you have a ship powered by the sun with great advanced weapons, and you might be able to outflank and help out down at the base. But the base has brood hunters and soldiers and people that are superpowered in some way. Do you trust them to fight and go for the massive airship in the air? And you chose the airship, which meant we still get to use just a glimpse of the airship action economy, just get a slight idea of what those do. But it led to this epic moment of coring a spot just enough into the heavy armor plating of this vessel, and then taking, those of you that have ever listened to Cloud Singer, getting the sunblades forward on this ship and then spiraling into it and literally punching your little ship into this big one, and then causing a whole bunch of damage of blowing stuff up and trying to get the big bads, in this case, attention, which you did. And then we close there and know that next time, no matter what, it's going to conclude on this ship. Because now that you're there and you know that this guy controls some of the big bads in the world, something has to give. And so in a way, it's both hard and easy for me to then say, okay, I need to draft out all the different facets of the ship, how this could play out with his crew and him, and prepare for what other conclusions might be surging your way based on everyone's developments. And it makes it easy and hard to make a conclusion, because when you know you have maybe one more for that climax, you can kind of pour everything you can into that climax. And then after that, I am so down to have an epilogue where everybody comes back together. Those who survive come back together, and we have an epilogue where we share what, you know, the ending is for each of these characters. And some characters may not have an ending yet. It might be neat for us to discuss, I retire this character, or I keep this character for a future one-shot or a future mini campaign, or something like that is really neat, a neat thing to consider and to explore, especially if you feel like you're not done with that character, which is something that is really difficult when I hear about those few campaigns that end at level 20 and they go, but I love this character and I've been with them for years. You know, I don't want to put them away yet. And then there are other people that say, I'm good. I can put them away satisfied. And I like entertaining the idea that even past a conclusion, there may be other stories to tell, but that main story can still be finished. I'm really curious in terms of story structure and flow and just where you feel this is driving toward, how the two of you who were in Team Bug last night, what was your favorite part, what was your criticism, and where you think you're going?
I will go. So the number one thing, like you said, that made me just relax was when you said, we're done with Act 2. like it was very clear there was a structure to the session. So when we were playing and everything, like we had a lot of talking, and even through the pact part with Yakovis or whatever his name is,
You got it.
I still can't pronounce it.
It's hard, I know.
But there was that feeling of, are we spending too much time on this? Like it didn't like for me as a player, we had talked a lot, but it didn't feel we had learned a lot, you know? So and that's one of those things when it comes to social interaction. Like I felt like we were asking a lot of questions and not getting like a proportionate amount of answers, you know, which now makes us like, it made me feel like we're not making any traction. But
Right.
to know that it's like, oh, we're 2/3 done with what I planned. It's like, oh, cool. Like now that there's like almost like a progress bar in my head, where it's like, it's not that we're spending too much time, so now we won't have time for something else. It's like, it was planned we should spend this much time on this thing. So it actually made me relax a little bit more when you were like transparent with that structure. And we've even done that with our boss fights, you know, using the dynamic system and everything, or the 3-act battles. Like there is something different to be said besides like, oh, this creature's hurt, he's more hurt, he's pretty hurt. Like to be like, you've moved from act 1 of the fight to act 2. Like even having that transparent in the structure of the session, all of a sudden it just gave clarity. Like because at one point Julie asked me, how much longer are you playing for? And I didn't have a good answer. But when you're like, we're 2/3 done and it's like 10 p.m. now, it's like, oh, well, it took us about 4 hours-ish was like 2/3 of it. So about 2 hours. Like it really like it helped. It just, the structure helped me.
It helped me
That
too
was
in
like
terms
my
of,
initial
timing.
thing.
That was the first session with Team Bug that like we always lose our stamina at midnight. We're done at midnight. That's when everything for that crew. So to have that 3-act structure and be able to say, yeah, we just finished act 2 and it's 10 p.m. I was checking the time, and even in the airship battle, I'm like, yeah, they're probably going to punch a hole into this ship and then we're going to stop. And that'll be perfect. What a great time to stop. They are there. They're on the ship. That was perfect. It was very helpful for me for my timing. And I'm very pleased that I ended on time for once.
I think my favorite thing with D&D and with this particular session was the social interaction. I can see where John was saying that it felt like it wasn't entirely clear if we were making leeway in this particular conversation with Yakovas, which, by the way, I think is a really cool name as a side note, because it reminds me of how language works. And if you go back into like Old Norse and Old Icelandic and stuff, the word for example, Jonathan, they don't spell it with a J. They'd spell it with an I-O, because it's Jonathan or something like that. So I thought that was pretty cool, just as a side note. But yeah, I can see where it might have been a little bit concerning on whether or not what we were saying had any like impact on where the interaction was going. But I recognize that. I recognize that feeling, but I also recognize that we did have a course of action that was available to us, which was to let him inside and all that stuff, because there was clearly, it wasn't, even though it was Yakovas that was being the one saying, being aloof and being very vague and like, I can't really tell you, it's on the need to know, and you don't need to know, that kind of thing. But he clearly needed help. Well, that to me says, okay, well, once we help him, we'll understand. And that is hard for Team Bug, because Team Bug is so straightforward and they want to know answers right now, because we are always honest. We always say what we're feeling, because if you're not honest, if you're not honest, somebody's gonna die. So that's probably one of the reasons we were a little bit, not too sure about this guy. But then in character, I was like, Rowan brightens up suddenly and says, we should let this guy in, because I had also put 2 and 2 together. If we don't let this guy in, he's going to turn into a giant shark. And I don't like giant sharks because they're hard to kill. So let's bring him into the ship and we'll address things later. Maybe there's like, because I don't know how, like, as a player, I don't really know how magic works, but maybe there's like physical constraints. He can't turn into a giant shark in the ship because there's not enough space, and he'll just get like big and puffy or something like that. That would be kind of funny, but just like.
I understand also that the hang up. I felt the hang up in Act 2 of where like we're going a lot more back and forth, and at that point the whole party was present. We had the missing party member now in the mix going, hey, I can intimidate him into helping us, and I can do this thing. And it's like we're starting to muddy the waters a little bit in terms of his responses and where he's ignoring that character. And, that makes me angry. Like, well, he's not interested in you. And there's a lot of differences there. But also I really appreciate that once the pact was struck and the remove curse went through, once those two things happened, Ian did a great job in recognizing, like, oh, that curse sucks. And the main curse that's on Iakovas is it's one that makes him infatuated by anyone who is connected to Umberlee. It makes it so he can't leave his space. He's been there for 100 years. He can't move from outside that space. He's a freaking shark. And it also makes him a little muddled, so he can't, like, be as forthright because he's so focused on my queen. My queen, I have to, you need break the curse, please. And it's just this weird cycle. The moment that happened, his whole demeanor has changed. And even in this coming into this final bit, he's quieter. He might be able to just give you information because he's free now. He doesn't have to be bound by that curse anymore. And I like that, Ian, you noticed that he changed. Like, oh, he doesn't like pursue this person anymore. He's just, oh, that sucks. But that I knew that was going to be a challenge for Team Bug. So that's why it was in the 3-act structure that you're going to talk to him during this time. And when we conclude it, we're ready for the next bit and we'll build that momentum back up. Because I knew it might get a little muddy in the middle there.
Yeah. And it's interesting because what this did is it demonstrated the value of having varied personalities within a social interaction party. Because we talk about Team Bug like that, and I'm afraid what happened. So Solomon, as a character, is designed with dampened emotions to have a very specific approach to things because he has a very specific job to do, right? As a specialist, he's a monster hunter. He's there to kill monsters. So actually, if we were to talk in terms of a character study, he would have preferred the opposite. He just would have preferred if the guy turned into a giant shark, he would have stabbed him a bunch and then died because then it's over with. Job done. Fix the ship, Yep. Like, so it's one of the reasons I like Rowan's introduction into the party is because Rowan is empathic. Like, she literally, from an ability score standpoint, covers Solomon's weak points, right? Because Solomon is a high dex wisdom character with secondary stats to constitution, intelligence, and weaknesses in strength and charisma, Now, the strength he covered with Molotov, right? Molotov is primary strength constitution with a secondary in dex and not really focused on anything else, And then Rowan, as a charisma-based caster, because Rowan is a warlock, covers that charisma. It's why we had talked about this in, like, I think it was Grey Owl's chapter 7 or 8. Like, Solomon had spent the first hour of the chapter basically going up to everyone and being like, I'm good at fighting. I'm not good at talking to people. Can you be the person to talk to these people for me? Because their impulsive decision making is just threatening everybody. And I know I can't convince them otherwise, but you can. And I think Rowan was the first character that actually recognized that and actually followed through on being able to cover that weakness. So you're right. I think what happened is I was doing that from a character place, but not a player place. And I think a lot of the some of our other players at the table, they interpreted that from a player place where we're more effective as players if we're upfront and honest, as opposed to honesty and upfrontness is a character trait, which is both a strength and a flaw for this character. That's kind of like Rowan handling it, because it would be a betrayal to Solomon's character concept to have to take on that role himself, you know? So, and I never wanted him to be. I've never designed him to be a leader. It's just that every party he's really meshed with has been like, well, what does Solomon think we should do? And then I'm like, I don't know. How about you think for yourselves? Like, and it doesn't, and then it ends up going sideways anyway.
Just like in Cloud Singer.
Yeah, yeah.
Listening to that.
Yeah. So it's and I've also I was one of the players, like when Adam mentioned like level 20 not done with. I don't know if I would ever be done with Solomon's story, because he's not a character where I see having a beginning, middle, and end. I just like playing him, you know? I just find it interesting to be in that character's headspace and play that character's mechanics. So we built in closure to this story arc. That doesn't mean I'm done with his story, because I don't know if his story needs an ending. But I will say that from what I've heard of Team Tree, and having played with Team Tree for the first 15 chapters or whatever, Team Bug feels more like a spin-off to a TV show that has a branch story, and there are common characters, but it doesn't feel as connected to what's happening in Stormrack. Like, we haven't gotten a lot of references to what's been... Not that we would, because we're in the north and we're in the wilderness. Like, it's not like, hey, did you hear about that tower that blew up? Did you hear about that tree that blew up? Like, we haven't gotten any of that. So as far as we know, everybody's dead in a ditch. Like, we just don't know. That's also why, yes, we're approaching our last session, but I'm not sure that's the end of our primary story or the close of our first season, you know? So it's, whereas I do think that based on what you've been saying about Team Tree, that sounds like the end to their series, but that doesn't mean it's an end to the world, and it doesn't mean that those characters don't have smaller roles to play, but their story arc is kind of like on its other side, you know? Right. So it's just that those are kind of like the impressions I've been getting with Team Bug. Like, it's not a side story, it's a spin-off story, you know? Kind of like Angel and Buffy, you know?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and so I like pretty much all the things you just said there, and I agree that when it comes to D&D characters, I mean, you don't need to make like an ending. Like, I always talk about compelling storytelling and how like a satisfying ending is crucial for a campaign and for your character and stuff like that. And that's true. But that doesn't mean, you know, you'll never play them again, or it doesn't mean that there's not more to find out about them. So I guess my answer to that question would be, I can see what Rowan's ultimate goal is in life, which is, without giving too much spoilers, which is to reclaim her family, basically. She basically lost and was separated from her family through, death, among other things. And I think that to like, she could definitely still go and find them again. But that begs the question on on what kind of lingering effects it'll have on her, this whole adventure, because she's a level 20 warlock. Well, I should say a level 17 warlock with 3 levels of cleric now, and which is going well, by the way. And she, like, if she goes back to them, does she lose all that? You know, again, trying not to spoil too much here, because I don't know who's going to be listening to this, but If, does that just mean she retires basically? Well, maybe not, maybe she doesn't get back to her family until 4 more adventures or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with prolonging a story, but still having this overarching concern and goal in the background. Or even better, if it turns out to be impossible for her to return to her family, then like she has to find closure with that. She has to accept that. And I think that her experiences, all these years of being, in this place have, allowed her to adapt to that scenario. She's probably fully willing to accept that she might never get back to her family. And so she's taken up this now becoming much more a priority mission of trying to rescue her patron from the clutches of a god eater, which, I mean, the patron's not like in imminent danger, but it's looming on the horizon, we'll say. So we don't want that to happen.
In a lot of ways, I agree with that idea of the spin-off series, because you might have conclusive arcs that like the main group concludes their thing, and then there's a ripple that hits the side story, and the side story concludes their first arc. And in a way, by having that separation, this is an interesting thought experiment. The 2 additional people that jumped in at level 15, it was really a way to bring them into the world and have the opportunity to have them play with us. But coming to terms as the DM that I may not be able to offer them as much of a satisfying arc because they missed all that time. That's not their fault. But it's an interesting perspective to then kind of swap them in as they're the guests that came in. They're the guest characters. And as we close this arc, wouldn't it be interesting if we followed those guest characters now? They become the fan favorites and we vote on the new series. And then they go to this other thing with 2 others from the first group. Or, it's an interesting consideration from the cinematic universe. Go ahead, John.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things that like we were bouncing this idea back and forth with each other, Adam, yesterday, which is so there's and this kind of goes off of what Ian was saying about compelling stories too. There's a difference between a character's story and the group's story. So like for me, I felt like I have not been a part of, obviously I haven't been part of the Team Tree story since chapter 15, like basically like I felt my character was part of that group's narrative. And as a party, we had developed certain rapport. And then when we got split, for every like the reasoning was sound why we should split, but now we're no longer part of that party. Like we were side characters in that party's story, but now we're our own party with our own story. So it's not even that they're guest characters. It's that this is just a whole new thing. It's in the same world. It's in the same continuity, but like I have no idea what's going on with the houses in Stormrack. It doesn't matter. That's not relevant to the storyline that we're following, All of the intrigue that we had built up, we're no longer part of that, And that happens in television. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever watched The Vampire Diaries, but, like, that happens all the time where, like, all of a sudden, don't give me that face. I like that show. So, not as much as I used to, but it's all right. But there was like a part where like they're like, oh, I'm gonna go to New Orleans because I want to go hang out, and they had a whole spin-off series. But then certain characters would move back and forth between 2 series, So it's not about them, but their contribution to the story is still impactful and still matters, So I could see that. Like to me, Solomon's story concluded pretty much as soon as we started going to Feathertongue. His emotional arc, as of now, it was done. There hasn't really been any character change in him since, like, basically it's like, oh, it's cool that you marry my daughter to Lila. Like chapter 12 like was the closure for his individual story. You know, there are still parts of his story that he's explored. Like he found Everett in one of these chapters. He kind of like started piecing together parts of his past, but that didn't do anything to change who he was or change his outlook or perspective. So like one of the ideas that I thought would be cool is Rowan has such depth to her character's story that there hasn't really been the room or the attention from other players to do. So it's like what you said, where what if we just have like a 3-session follow-up? That's like a mini campaign, right?
Yeah.
Of like, we don't have to reset the world or anything. We just have a session 0 to purely establish information. Like, Rowan's made this deal and made Umberlee mad. This bad thing is starting to happen to Aurora. Solomon is in the party, but he's a side character here to help them along. And he's not even, he's just a friend that's along for the ride, you know? So it's like,
it's like a throwback to the original series.
Exactly, yeah. So, no, exactly, right? So it's, and he's, you know, there's probably things he does to help out, but it's not about him, you know? And this is kind of what I've been trying to do setting up Geras as well. One of the things I love about the campaign we've been playing is everybody has basically literally a different background. They come from a different place in the world. So if we go to that place, one player has disproportionately more information than everybody else. So like for Adam's character, Fennec, who comes from the orc stronghold of Kolvik, if we go to Kolvik, Adam is going to be fed more information ahead of time because he's going to be the guide. It's going to be about him. That doesn't mean the other characters don't matter, and it doesn't mean they have less spotlight time or whatever. It just means Adam is going to be doing a lot of the explaining in character of like, oh, well, this is the favorite place I went to eat dinner, and like, this is my favorite weaponsmith. And the other characters are going to be having that wonder of discovery, while the other character is the guide to this new place, you know? So it changes the dynamics, but it doesn't make any player more or less valued or more or less important. And that's how I could see kind of a follow-up, because that's the other thing is I have a feeling we're gonna end next session with a lot of loose ends. Wouldn't it be interesting to just take through a small group of characters that we've already developed, characters we know work together, to just explore a lot of those little things and still get to play out those level 20 characters? So we don't even have to worry about leveling up or anything. We know what our characters do. We know how our characters think. But we get to delve a little bit deeper because it's not about the world. It's about the characters in the world. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that's interesting. Now I've got 2 thoughts about that. Because if we were to do that, it would be kind of interesting to record it as a podcast. Not like one we would edit heavily or anything like that. But like, maybe, you know, something that we could add to our archives, even for just ourselves, because I don't think there are too many podcasts out there that are like level 20. You know, like I don't even think very many podcasts get to level 20 as a live play of D&D.
Yeah. I got to record a thing with some people recently, and it was interesting for them to sort of interview me about, you know, what campaigns I run, and they were also conversing about how, oh yeah, well, this is the first time I've ever gotten to a level 20 anything, and it's really interesting. There's a lot that goes on at level 20, and I went, yeah, I just concluded my 4th campaign at level 20 a couple weeks ago, and they went, what? And I actually think Night Owls would have been our 6th campaign at level 20, but still, like I've done multiple campaigns at level 20, and I've got 2 active right now that are level 20. Like, what? Like because it's so rare. Like, a lot of campaigns end at 10 or 12 or 15, and they don't go beyond that. Sometimes that's scheduling, sometimes there's a lot that goes on, and sometimes it gets really complicated. There's a lot of factors. But they were so surprised that it's become normal for me to run, you know, high level everything, because yeah, it's assumed you're going to do a campaign with me. You're going to go from levels 1 to 20, and you might stay 20 for a while. That's okay, because now you can be superpowered.
Yeah, and actually, I would even argue that's a pretty fair achievement for a DM, because like, yeah, probably most DMs don't even get to level 20, because I've heard this hot take on level 20 that it's just sometimes it just gets boring for people. And I feel that can be like frustrating, because you've invested so much in this character. Level 20, we always say like level 20, 18 to 20 is icing on the cake, but like, the icing should still taste good, right? So why not? Why is it boring? And so, of course, there's a lot of factors to take into account if we're going to do a podcast or anything like that. But I just thought it would be cool to spitball that idea. The other thing I was going to say, just to tie together all the things we've been saying about concluding stories for characters, is that when I do, the further I go into these characters, and the more likely it is their story's going to end, I know that I'm going to play future campaigns in a similar setting or in the same setting, but maybe later in the future or something like that. I would love to be able to see the impacts my character has made in those future campaigns even more directly. Like, maybe, yeah, we're going into the next campaign knowing the history because we were there, right? But what about like an actual impact, a statue of I'm not saying I want a statue, by the way, a statue of the character in the square being like, this was the person that sacrificed themselves to become the world tree. Or with Eld, for example, he's concluded his this campaign as an Archfey warlock, and he's devoted so much time to this patron that there's no way it just ends there. He wants to go and become like part of the court, the winter court or something. And so in future campaigns, if we ever interact with the Fae again, how cool would it be to see him like from a different character's perspective? How cool would that be? I actually intend to put him in in my homebrew setting as like a ambassador for the winter court.
I had it in my head because I have a very structured Feywild that he's the Winter Knight to the Winter Court, which makes perfect sense that he guards Karama's tree through the Feywild, and it's like a sentry to that, because the tree is that seed in particular connects across planes. So and that's the whole thing behind the World Tree, that it is summoned across many planes. It is not just, and it's in the same location in every plane. So it's like an interconnected nexus of all of those planes, which is.
Does that mean that let's say Matt as the tree is going to be able to talk to Karama in the next session, or a version of him?
Yes, Karama,
doesn't necessarily.
Based on Karama's actions, Karama was one of the seeds that.
Baller.
So this also brings up the interesting idea of future stories. Is if we at the close of this book, so to speak, because they're books. At the close of that, I want to have an epilogue where we all like meet like this, and talk about the conclusions of our characters, or like what happens in the next year, like it's a 1 year later kind of thing, or something like that. And it's interesting to note too, we might have people that have characters that they want to continue, and wouldn't it be interesting if we did that, an extra side story? What if that side story, just spitballing, that side story included Solomon, Rowan, Aurora, and Darren, and have a specific pathway that they go do.
Yep.
And then we have a different side story with Rowan, Clover, and Reblith, and Knox, and they all go to a side story.
The structure that's in my head, and it clarified this morning in the shower, is like, if you think about the way that Avatar: The Last Airbender is set up, you have Avatar the series where there are 3 books that follow a consecutive story. And then you have The Legend of Korra, which is a separate series in the future that follows new characters. along a different kind of emotional journey.
Yep.
And then you have the comic books in the middle
Yes.
of like, these aren't as important events and you don't need to read them to understand what's happening, but they are very specific. Like, and to me, this is actually something I got from Team 4-Star, which is the smaller the scale of your events, the more intimate and more in-depth character analysis you get. Because it's not about having grand stakes. Not that stories are bad if they have grand stakes, but that a lot of times it's the small things that have the most impactful, character change, So it's like Solomon meeting Everett. Like, to Solomon, or Solomon going to finding Whiskey's gravestone,
Yeah.
like that was probably more telling about Solomon's character and his true personality than like anything else that's happened. So it's those little things, and that it was towards criticism of Rise of Skywalker, that it's basically like, when your plan to rise the stakes is, well, now we have 1,000,000 Death Stars. How about that? Like, if you just make things bigger, like, that doesn't make them better,
No.
And a lot of times it's like Molotov finding out that his relationship with Solomon was programmed. Like, that was like
huge.
that was the good stuff, that was the character to character interaction that energizes me the most out of this game. It's the stuff that really I like the most. And that's why I only like exploration as a pillar of play if it's to serve social interaction. So if finding the coin now like Los token of like, this is an ancient artifact, if that leads to a moral discussion over whether or not to take the treasure, that to me is interesting. And it's technically exploration because you're discovering something new, but it's exploration in service to social interaction.
Yeah.
And PC, and that's the I've had a longing for Team Tree because there was a lot of character to character moments in Team Tree that I really do miss. And of course, anytime you're not doing something, you might miss it. That doesn't mean that you're not enjoying the other stuff that you're doing.
Yes.
But it was just that's the part that, like, I don't know. Like, I almost feel like an epilogue is needed just to, like,
yes.
But yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
I am very much in favor of the idea, and just talking this out with both of you, of it's really clarified for me that in a lot of ways it's freeing, that I don't have to stress about making sure that there is the ultimate conclusion for every single one of you, whether you're prepared for it or not. Like, I don't have to rush. Like, we can conclude this portion of the story, but then those more intimate areas of exploration and character arcs can still continue. And it's the allowance of that. And I just quickly wrote down like Grey Owl's legacy stories or Grey Owl's side stories. And how interesting would that be to say, it's a side story from book one. So, hey, take your book one character and we'll go do a story. Or we do a mini campaign that's set in this little pocket of time. And wouldn't that be cool? And then it'll be very select. It wouldn't just be like, everybody jump in. It's Tales from Ba Sing Se. We're doing a lot of references to Korra and Avatar, but it works. Like, there are this is a supplemental material. These are the supplemental archives, extra adventures of the books. And that way I like the idea that there's the big story, the big campaign, and then little pockets of other stories. And it'd be neat. Like, we could be in the middle of running book two and decide, you know what, I need a break from book two. Who wants to run a side story at your level 20 characters in this point of time between these two? It would be really interesting. And it also allows me to go back to that time period that I love so much, and get to explore another little facet of it. And that is very, very freeing. Now that it's just me, I can just let go a little bit and it'll be okay. Don't pressure it.
No, absolutely. And Oh man, it just gets me so excited because it gives me the same feeling, and I think I've told you guys this before, but it's moments like these that give me the same feeling that I get when I read my favorite book series, because there's always more possibilities that I can imagine, of course, for the kinds of like cliffhangers or loose ends, and things like that the author is, and it allows us to fill in the ideas with our imagination because maybe the author doesn't continue or something because they're interested in other projects. But we are the authors. So if we're interested, we can go and check that stuff out. And it's going to be really cool because we know exactly what kind of things we need to do to make it not only satisfying, but continuous so that there's a continuity to it. And that it feeds into everything else. That's one of the reasons, by the way, that I love the idea of seeing my old characters with my new characters' eyes, because I want to know how they're going to interact. I want to know maybe with Eld again. He had this cool like mage's staff that was a fusion between Wanda of the Pact Keeper and a staff of power, and it just like they just put it together, and it's like, well, that kind of artifact, maybe it still like exists. Like maybe he gives it up after a while because now he's in the Feywild, so like whatever. But maybe he has a vision or something in the Feywild that somebody else is going to need this staff more than he is, and he puts it in the exact right place for somebody else to find it. That's just hypothetical, but those are the things that I really love about D&D. So all this stuff just gets me so excited. It's so great.
And I'm very energized for looking forward. And after finishing as many campaigns as I have, the ripple effects are part of my living document. My internal consistency is like, if this campaign is closed, then how do these characters now impact the rest? And though Night Owl Season 3 did recently conclude, I haven't written the epilogues yet and like compiled all those notes because it was such a intense thing. I had to like let me step back from that for a little bit and let me decompress from it. But that desire for me is also there. Even just as a quick aside, in the final battle of Season 3, a character from Season 2 arrived and just like fired an arrow. Even just that, just showing up and being like, Batang, and fired an arrow. People went, oh my God, tell me that's this character. And yeah, oh my God. And it just made such an impact for them to be able to say, he's from the previous season. He was there with us fighting that time. So he's back, just enough to even just fire and be known is really cool, because it kind of grounds the legacy of what you have done. And whether your characters end up being connected to your future characters at all, but they are connected to the world, and what you did mattered. And that's kind of the end result here. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the DM Shower Thoughts. You can find us on Podbean and iTunes every Friday-ish. We almost got it settled now as it uploads. And you can find us on YouTube a little bit behind. Every now and then a video will come out. You can also find the YouTube channel, the DM Shower Thoughts, just DM Shower Thoughts. And you'll see videos for all of our beautiful faces very soon. And you can find my GM's Corner with the study hall, John's study hall, and notes from The Apprentice as other blog posts here and there featured on the website at adamstrakeproductions.com. You can find dice and custom miniatures as well. Whew. Have a wonderful day, and please, game responsibly. Bye-bye now.